Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is the case of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew is a 49-year-old mother who was reported missing on Mother's Day, May 2020. This was at the time of COVID-19. Suzanne has two beautiful daughters. Her husband, Barry Morphew, reported her missing. Today, Suzanne Morphew's remains has been found after 3 years. It is a sad day, but at least it's a day that brings answers of what could have happened to Suzanne Morphew. Every case and every person's life needs a closure, especially for the family, the loved ones, and hopefully we should be getting some answers soon of what exactly happened to Suzanne Morphew and how she came to her death.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back.
Police and the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew, showing police discovering the first evidence in the search for the Colorado mom who went missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Her husband has been charged with her murder. Our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, joins us now with more on that video. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Robin. Since Suzanne Morphew disappeared on Mother's Day 2020, barely a trace of the mother of two has been found. Not her wallet, not her phone, not her body. And that body cam video shows those first crucial hours of the investigation and the first clues that would eventually lead police to accuse her husband of drugging her, murdering her, and then staging it to look like maybe a mountain lion had killed her.
Suzanne!
This morning, that newly released body camera footage revealing the crucial first hours of the investigation into the disappearance of Colorado mom Suzanne Morphew, who went missing back on Mother's Day in 2020.
Suzanne?
The just-released footage was submitted last August as evidence against her husband, Barry Morphew, now charged with first-degree murder. As night falls, Barry arrives on the scene and asks about the first piece of evidence authorities found, Suzanne's blue bike.
Where is it? Where's the bike? Oh, it's right there. Where was it? It was like just right down here in this little embankment.
And he even asks if a mountain lion may have gotten her.
Was it a crash? The way it was laid, it kind of looked like it, but there's not really that much damage to the bike.
The lion?
Yeah, it was just like
Was it no lion? Mountain lion?
Investigators offered another theory, that he drugged and murdered her and hid the evidence. You can later hear investigators instructing him not to touch her bicycle.
Hey, did you not touch that bike with your hands, please?
Earlier in the day, the footage shows a young man who identifies himself as one of Suzanne's daughter's boyfriends meeting an officer in the driveway after arriving at the Morphew's house to look for Suzanne, who investigators say had been having a 2-year-long extramarital affair.
Have you looked in the house?
I have, yeah.
Right. You looked through everything?
Yes.
You haven't found her?
No.
The young man says he also searched for the 49-year-old in his car. And when asked if he checked a trail nearby, he shares that it would be out of character for her to have gone up there.
Well, she hasn't, and I haven't checked there yet because that climb at the beginning is really hard. Someone needs to go there, I think.
But that is where Suzanne's bike was found. Later, when investigators ask him about Barry and Suzanne's relationship, he answers hesitantly, looking to his father for approval before speaking.
Do Barry and Suzanne get along pretty well?
You can answer. You know, I think they've had some problems. Normal husband and wife type deals.
So far, the couple's daughters have been supportive of their father, seen arriving in court alongside Barry Morphew, who has pleaded not guilty. Now he'll be back in court later this month. It'll be a different courtroom and a different venue, a judge granting a motion to change venue because of all of the pre-trial publicity. Michael.
All right, Matt, thank you so much.
Story this morning. After 3 years, investigators have found and identified the skeletal remains of Suzanne Morphew. She disappeared back on Mother's Day 2020 in Salida. Her body was found in Saguache County. Now, at one point, Morphew's husband, Barry Morphew, faced charges in her death. That case was dismissed before the trial ever began due to lack of evidence. But now investigators have Morphew's body, which was the main piece of evidence prosecutors lacked in this case. So to get some legal insight into the next steps, our 9 News legal expert Whitney Trailer is joining us. Thanks for coming in.
Sure, it's good to be here.
This story is fascinating a lot of people. It gained national attention. It's taken a lot of twists and turns, including the arresting and charging Barry Morphew, the husband. But those charges, the trial was suspended.
Yeah.
Why was it dismissed at the time?
Yeah, this case has taken so many twists and turns because what happened was they didn't have a body, of course. Mm-hmm. And so you can still prosecute without a body, and no body prosecution, but it's obviously much more difficult. And so the prosecutor initially had charged Barry Morphew with 3 different charges, including murder. Mm-hmm. And while that was pending, the prosecutor was continually saying, we have lots of information, lots of data, but it was all sealed, so nobody actually knew what information there was. And so as they went forward, the prosecution was continually being sanctioned by the judge because they weren't sharing information with the defense. So allegedly there was another male's DNA found on the bike, and those kind of things were not shared with the defense. So ultimately, just days before the trial, the case was dismissed, but it was dismissed without prejudice. So that means that it can be brought again. If it was dismissed with prejudice, they would not be able to bring it again.
So we know Barry Morphew was charged, was arrested. No trial actually started, and there was a reason for that. A lot of people have been bringing up this double jeopardy thing.
Yes.
Talk about how that really doesn't apply in this situation.
Yeah, double jeopardy doesn't apply here. He wasn't tried. And so double jeopardy is a beautiful thing in the Fifth Amendment that prevents us from being tried twice for the substantially same crime. So an overly zealous prosecutor tries somebody not guilty, they try it again and again and again until they get it right. And so double jeopardy here, he was not tried. He was charged, and as I mentioned earlier, the judge dismissed it without prejudice, meaning the prosecution could bring it again. And so if the forensic evidence, now that they found the remains, if that implicates him, he would certainly be charged. And there's a lot of people who believe that.
Yeah, that was kind of the worry. Had they proceeded in the trial with what they currently had without the remains, then double jeopardy could have absolutely applied.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. If he had been charged and found not guilty, and then they found the body and found all this incriminating evidence, yes, he would not be able to be charged again. And that's, a concern that people may have with double jeopardy, but overall it is a protection that we want as citizens of this country.
What happens next here in this case?
So now they didn't release much information about the state of the remains and if there were other evidence and that kind of thing. So we'll have to wait and see. They will continue to prosecute. And as I understand, they found they found the remains when they were on some other investigation. And so now this will certainly open it up, and they'll take what evidence they find and move forward, hopefully with prosecution.
Yeah, I think a big part of this is the autopsy report, which takes several weeks to see how Suzanne died, and so that will be a big part of this as well. Well, we appreciate you joining us. We know we kind of...
joins me now for more on this. Brian, could this discovery potentially change the case against Suzanne Morphew's husband, which was dismissed in 2022?
Absolutely. The major question is, which way does it go? Does the evidence that we're going to find in this case point to the fact that maybe his cell phone was in the same location that her body was found, thus creating more evidence against him, or does it completely exonerate him? That's something we're going to have to wait for law enforcement and the authorities to tell us.
Now, the husband filed a civil case against prosecutors looking for $15 million, I think it was, in damages. So what happens to that case now?
It's probably going to be put on hold because the answers to this criminal case might help or hurt that case. He filed a $15 million lawsuit because the prosecution withheld key evidence in that case, specifically that an unknown male DNA was found on the bike of Suzanne Morphew as well as the home, and that wasn't given to him. Now, if it ends up being nothing and the prosecution didn't do what's called malicious prosecution, his case could end. But if they end up finding who that other person is, it could be a very strong case for him.
Now, authorities have said that Barry Morphew is still a suspect here. They aren't ruling out future charges against him. So what are you watching out for as we learn more about this case?
I'm looking for both the physical, like the DNA, and also other types of forensics, as well as digital forensics. Where was Barry Morphew in terms of the location of where her body was found? What about this unknown male DNA? Can we rule it out? Who was it? What is the state of her body? How did she die? Are there strangulation marks? Are there something that would give us an identity as to who did this? A lot of information that the prosecution and law enforcement is keeping very close to the chest, which makes sense at this point. We don't know yet, but can give us a lot of answers to many questions we've been asking.
But he's now suing prosecutors after they dropped all charges last year. Now, Russia has an exclusive interview with Morphew and his daughters. Good morning, Ariel.
Good morning to you guys. Barry Morphew says his life is ruined. That $15 million civil suit accuses prosecutors and law enforcement of lying and withholding evidence, focusing only on Barry Morphew and humiliating him. But authorities tell us they didn't drop the charges because they thought Barry was innocent. They felt they didn't have enough evidence to convict without Suzanne's body.
This morning, demands for justice for Suzanne Morphew, 3 years after the Colorado mom mysteriously vanished on Mother's Day in 2020. Authorities believe she is dead, her body never found, now officially classified a cold case.
Somebody in this community needs to keep her name out there.
Suzanne's husband Barry initially charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence, but those charges dropped just before his trial. Now Barry and his daughters Macy and Mallory are speaking exclusively to ABC News, claiming his life has been ruined by false accusations.
What have these last 3 years been like for you?
Very, very sad. Very confusing. Just so traumatic. Like literally our worst nightmare.
Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of your wife?
Absolutely not. It's very hurtful to lose your reputation and your integrity.
Barry filing a $15 million civil suit against prosecutors, the sheriff, and several investigators.
So I know that 15 million is a huge number, but I don't think that, in my mind, that covers any of the damage that's happened to Barry and the girls.
I know he's innocent. And if they would just look for Suzanne outside of where they hypothesized Barry could have possibly buried her remains, they could find her.
His daughters standing by him.
You never had a shred of doubt once you heard the evidence from law enforcement against your dad?
I've never had a shred of doubt. Not one.
Prosecutors say at the time they believed that they were close to finding Suzanne's body and dropped those charges against Barry, hoping for additional evidence. Authorities tell ABC News they still believe Barry Morphew could be involved in his wife's disappearance and aren't ruling out future charges.
Law enforcement, the DAs, believed that they had their guy, and they believe that there's a mountain of evidence against you. There's just not Suzanne's body.
They're wrong. They've got tunnel vision, and they looked at one person, and they've got too much pride to say they're wrong and look somewhere else.
These charges were dropped without prejudice, which means if authorities feel like there's more evidence, they could charge you again. Do you live with fear of that?
Well, I was innocent the first time they arrested me, so I'm sure it's possible. But I don't have anything to worry about. I've done nothing wrong.
Was there any indication before she disappeared that something was amiss?
No.
Did you observe any fights, arguments, disagreements between your mom and your dad that concerned you before?
No.
Prosecutors offering texts which appear to show a strained marriage, Suzanne referring to Barry as Jekyll and Hyde, and just before she disappeared telling Barry, "I'm done." Suzanne confiding in a friend, "Macy and I had a very tough talk yesterday. She's weary of the tension here. She knows how he is toward me and almost begged me to divorce him. He's still pulling Mal in." But Barry and his daughters deny the marriage was in trouble.
We had a wonderful life, wonderful marriage. She was just so loving and giving and such a good mother.
Before her disappearance, Suzanne fighting cancer.
And I know that she was going through chemotherapy for the last couple of years before her disappearance, and I know she was going through some hard things and made some bad decisions.
What kind of bad decisions?
She was really having trouble with the chemotherapy and the drugs.
Investigators also say she was involved with someone else.
When you found out that Suzanne was having an affair, what was your first thought?
My heart was broke. My heart was broken. I didn't believe it.
What's been the hardest part?
Just not having Mom.
Not knowing.
It's really difficult, especially because of the lack of closure we have.
And Barry Morphew has moved out of Colorado because he says the public and media scrutiny has been too much on him and his daughters. The Chaffee County Sheriff's Office and DA Linda Stanley both saying they cannot comment on pending litigation or on ongoing investigations. Bottom line here, guys, Suzanne is still missing and no one has been held accountable.
Chaffee County man accused of killing his wife.
Tonight, for the first time, we're seeing some of the photographic evidence submitted in the Barry Morphew murder case. Good evening, I'm Mallory Anderson in for Bart tonight.
And I'm Heather Skold. Tonight, a first look at evidence in the murder case against accused wife killer Barry Morphew.
The mother of his two daughters vanished Mother's Day weekend 2020. KRDO News Channel 13 Sydney Stell combed through the new photos released by a Chaffee County judge today. She's live in the studio. Sydney.
Well, Heather, Mallory, you can see a photo here of Barry Morphew in a Denver hotel, or a suburban Denver hotel, I should say, on the day that his wife disappeared back in 2020. Investigators say these photos helped show that he made several trips to dumpsters that day. This photo shows him holding shovels in the hotel lobby. He told law enforcement he was there for a construction job, but they later found out he was not permitted to use his heavy equipment because it was a Sunday. His wife's body still has not been found. These photos show scratches on Barry's hands and arms taken in the days after his wife's disappearance. The court also released photos Friday of Suzanne's bedroom where a shell casing was found and of the tranquilizer dart found in the home's dryer trap. Suzanne's purse was left behind in her car. Evidence shows the purse and all of its contents, including her wallet with cash, her ID, her credit cards, all things investigators say someone would not leave behind if they just ran away to start a new life. We're also seeing new photos of Suzanne's bike and helmet. Barry told law enforcement that he believed his wife was out for one of her regular bike rides when something must have happened to her. This is where her bike and her helmet were found in relation to her home. Investigators said they didn't find any evidence of an attack or crash when they found her bike, and you can see the condition that her bike was found in, along with a partial photo of her helmet.
Remains of a Chaffee County woman missing more than 3 years recovered. And good evening, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Shannon Ogden. We are going to begin with that breaking news. The remains of Suzanne Morphew have been found in Saguache County.
And this comes 3 years after she was reported missing from her home in Salida. And Denver 7 Chief Investigative Reporter Tony Kowaleski is joining us here now with what we know right now, Tony.
Well, Ange, checking the phones all afternoon, people scrambling, trying to understand what happened, why it happened, and trying to get as many details as possible. Basically, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation has been scrambling, keeping a lot of information tight, but here's what we know. It's the murder mystery that for 3 years has captured the hearts and minds of Colorado and the entire country. When the news broke this afternoon, still a lot of unanswered questions. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation confirmed Suzanne Morphew's remains were located in the area of Moffett in Saguache County. She was first reported missing in Chaffee County. We've also learned investigators have stumbled upon some other issues, and we want to take you to that story now. We've learned investigators stumbled on the remains while searching in the area on an unrelated case. The CBI is electing not to disclose the specific location where Morphew's remains were located or the state of her remains. Here's a timeline to get you up to date. Suzanne Morphew was reported missing Mother's Day weekend in 2020. Nearly 1 year later, her husband, Barry, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Then, in April of last year, prosecutors dropped all charges against Barry Morphew. Earlier this year, Barry's attorney requested an investigation of the prosecution claiming misconduct. 5 days ago, investigators located a body in Saguache County. Today, as we reported, the CBI positively confirmed they are the remains of Suzanne Morphew. The announcement comes 4 months after Suzanne's husband and 2 daughters gave this exclusive interview to Good Morning America.
It's very hurtful to lose your reputation and your integrity.
CBI also announcing no arrests have been made since the body was identified. Important fact here, when charges were dropped against Barry Morphew, prosecutors said it was too difficult to pursue first-degree murder charges without a body. Now they have the remains, they have the body. Shannon?
All right.
May Suzanne Morphew rest in peace. It's a heartbreaking case, and it's sad that it took 3 years for closure to finally happen. But it's definitely worth the 3 years waiting. I always wish and pray that Suzanne Morphew would one day be found. Her brother in Indiana and her family have been searching for her through the mountains, hills, valleys. Barry Morphew has been charged, and the charges were dropped, but luckily the charges are back on. There's no guarantee that he did it. But if I give my feedback on this case that I've been following for a very long time, I personally believe that Barry Morphew has a lot of charges coming towards him, because he was seen throwing bin in 5 different areas. His hotel room that he rented right after Suzanne was missing was testified by workers, his co-workers. They said that the room smelled of bleach, and it was COVID epidemic time, so the swimming pool wasn't opened in the hotel. They said they do not use bleach in their rooms. And there was another evidence pointing towards him. There was definitely the house that he's a constructor in. The nearby neighbors said that they heard the loud cement machine, the tractors and everything on at 12 at midnight. And that was the same day Suzanne was missing. My heart breaks for the family, especially for the daughters. They've stood by their father very loyally. I don't know if they're in denial or if they don't want to accept that their father could be involved in whatever happened to their mother, which is terrible. Suzanne Morphew was having an affair that came out in the courts with her former high school boyfriend, and strangely enough, that's where she met Barry. They all went to the same high school, but the former boyfriend that she was still contacting in Indiana didn't want to get involved in this case. He gave his statements to the FBI and to the police because he's married and he has 6 children. He has 6 adult children. No human being deserves to lose their life. And I remember this story was such a mystery because Barry thought that Suzanne was having an affair, but Suzanne thought that Barry was having an affair too. So she went and got a spy pen, and the spy pen actually recorded Suzanne with the conversations with the man she was having an affair with. One of the daughters, the one standing next to her mother, the youngest daughter, said at the start, allegedly, that there was a lot of trouble happening home. There was a lot of yelling and all. And I think, honestly, Barry convinced Suzanne to move to Salida from Indiana, where she was born and raised. Her sisters, her brother, the whole family and her friends were there. I think, allegedly, that Barry Morphew has a narcissistic personality. There was a lot of things that were thrown around when the sheriff came to the house. It looked like there was a struggle or a fight. We saw the bruises on Barry, and it could have been most likely that Suzanne was defending herself. It's a